Today, Open Source Security is talking to Mike Milinkovich, the Executive Director of the Eclipse Foundation, and to Thabang Mashologu, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Eclipse Foundation. These two fine gentlemen have come today to talk about the Open VSX registry and some, I think, really exciting things that are going on. So Mike and Thabang, welcome to the show. I'll let the two of you kind of fight over who gets to do their little self-intro first, but I'm really excited.
All right, I'll do a self-intro, and then Thabang do a self-intro, and then I want to do an intro on what the heck Open VSX is. So, hi, I'm Mike. Been the executive director of the Eclipse Foundation for a really long time, and of course, seen a lot of changes in open source, and definitely a lot of changes in open source security over the last 22 years. Thabang?
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Josh, for having us on the show. I'm Thabang Mashologu, as you mentioned. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at the Eclipse Foundation, and I've been here for 8 years, and it feels like I started yesterday. It's a very fast-paced industry, as you know, and the Eclipse Foundation is moving quickly day to day as well. So I have the great pleasure of working with thousands, maybe millions, ultimately, of developers around the world through our various programs, and I'm involved from the ground up with Open VSX, something that I do on a day-to-day basis as well.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so maybe just a little bit on what Open VSX actually is.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have the name brand recognition, perhaps, of, say, NPM or PyPI or these kinds of places. I like to jokingly describe it as the most important package registry you've never heard of.
Nice.
And so to put this into perspective, first of all, what is it? So it is a package repository specifically targeting VS Code extensions. So VS Code is the tool of choice these days for developers, and the tool of choice for forking to build new tools these days. And that sort of is a big part of the story. As everybody knows, VS Code is a Microsoft product. It has a bunch of open source components that it builds on top of, one of which is the extension API. And so it's got this way to extend the VS Code tool with various extensions to do things like Java language support or Python language support or Markdown, whatever it is that you're doing. There's probably an extension for it. However, the package repository for VS Code, the terms of use says you can only use the Microsoft package repository if you're coming at it from a Microsoft product like VS Code. All right, so flashback 6 years ago, the Eclipse Foundation had a couple of projects, Eclipse Thea, Eclipse Che, which were using the open source extension API to build a different set of tools, and they needed a place for their developers to get extensions. So as my mom used to like to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So 6 years ago, we started this little thing. How bad could it be to offer an extension registry that was open to everybody? And so we initially motivated by our own projects, but then we, VS Codium and a couple of other things, Gitpod at the time, and I think even the initial code contribution came from them, and another company called. And what we did was we started running this as a service. So 6 years ago, it took us 5 years to get to 50 million downloads a month. Then along came this thing called artificial intelligence. You've probably heard of it.
Yep.
It's supposed to be a really big thing. And one of the biggest and fastest growing areas within AI is using AI for development. And there's been this explosion of developer tools. Think Cursor, Windsurf, Kiro, Project Bob, Google Anti-Gravity, so on and so forth, that all use, that basically all start their lives off as a fork of VS Code and all use this extension registry, or extension API. And they have all started pointing their products at Open VSX as the place to get their extensions. So 5 years to get to 50 million downloads a month. 1 year to get from 50 million to 110 million. Then 3 months to go from 100 million to 300 million, and another 2.5, 3 months to go from 300 million to 600 million. And like all of the other extension or all the other package repositories out there, we were supporting Open VSX through our membership dues, through some sponsorships. And as this ramp up happened, it basically broke our ability to support Open VSX with the resources that we had. Now, I just talked about the number of downloads, and so you might think that the real costs were the massive increase in infrastructure costs, but actually the real costs come from security.
Yep.
Because what happened for the first 5 years of the life of Open VSX, our security model was, hey, if you see something weird, let us know and we'll take it down.
Right.
But when I think I just saw some number that 70% of the Fortune 100 are using Cursor now, or words to that effect. When you're the tools that are using Open VSX are being used through enterprises, the scrutiny that you get in terms of what happens if there's malware goes up dramatically. So, we've gone from basically zero dedicated headcount to securing Open VSX to, I'll let Thabang answer the question on how many, but it's definitely a lot greater than zero. So it's our headcount costs have exploded. And so what we've done is, and I know you've had other people like Brian Fox and others on the show talking
Yep.
about the economics of the package repository dilemma. We're basically here to tell our story about going first. So
Yes.
we're the first open source organization, first open source foundation that has basically figured out a business model for our package repository. And so I want to assure everybody who's listening that we're still staying true to our open source roots. We're never going to charge a developer to download an extension. But there are a number of companies that are building massive businesses on top of this free infrastructure. And we figured out a business model that they actually see value in paying us money to make sure that this thing is operating at the scale that it needs to operate at.
Yeah. Okay. I want to first give maybe a little context for anyone who hasn't listened to the entire back catalog of this podcast. But I actually talked to Michael Windsor, who works with Alpha Omega. It feels like it was 2 episodes ago, but I know it's been a lot. And it amuses me because there's a video where he gave a talk. I think it was at FOSDEM. FOSDEM was what, like February? Man, that was a long time ago. But he gives this talk at FOSDEM, and he's talking about package registries and the challenges they have. And security is a huge one of them. And he says multiple times in his talk about how bandwidth isn't the problem. And the first 2 questions he gets are about bandwidth. It's like, did you not listen to the talk? But yes, that is, I think, a surprise to a lot of people, because I think naturally, as computer nerds, we hear about these registries, we hear about the kind of numbers you're talking about, we instantly jump to like infrastructure costs and bandwidth. But you're right, it's all the people and headcount and stuff. And Thabang, I will let you cover that now, because I am very interested actually in what like your kind of headcount and security team look like in this instance, because I generally have no idea how I would even start handling something like this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good direction to take the conversation here, because that Michael gave, by the way, was brilliant. And one of the things that he touches on is, yeah, perhaps the driver isn't bandwidth, but I think it's very easy, particularly for us as technologists, for developers to wrap our heads around, okay, there's some hard costs around operating and sustaining the types of registries that we're talking about here. So you've got your compute, you've got your storage, your ingress and egress bandwidth, all of those things that have at the end of the month you've got an invoice that you've got to pay. What we found over time was that Mike's point and really around how you operate this infrastructure and do it in a way that meets the demands of now companies that using this um, using Open VSX as a science experiment. They're running billion-trillion-dollar valuation companies off of this infra. What we came to learn was that, yeah, we actually had to reorganize, we had to hire, we had to recruit. And this is where, in a former life, I worked at 1 or 2 startups. And I thought I'd left that life behind me, but I guess things have a way of catching up to you because uh, Open VSX within our organization really is like a startup where we've had to go out and think through, okay, who do we need for what job, and how do we ensure that we have the coverage and ability to do things at scale? And we quickly saw that, as much as the infrastructure costs, the bandwidth costs were spiking up, that, similarly there was an exponential uh, curve around headcount. And as it stands right now, we've got 8 full-time equivalents in our engineering organization, or the team that's allocated to Open VSX. And that's from, 2 years ago, or even last year. Actually, time does fly. Last year, this time, we had one person. And so you see that kind of scale where we've actually had to go and design and hire people, the best people for the jobs, and that comes with a lot of cost, as you can imagine, right? So we've structured our organization in a way to actually be able to support Open VSX as the mission critical, you know, infrastructure that it is, because that's where we had a rude awakening last July, actually, July of 2025, where, they say that you never realize how much you're loved until you're missed, something like that. And we actually, I think the forcing function for us, the critical event, was that we had an outage. We had an outage in the summer, the North American summer of 25. And this was something that we were running off the sides of our desks, as Mike mentioned. There was a best effort service, background service, and then we had all of these brand name companies, the cool guys, calling us and saying, "Hey, wait a second, OpenVSX cannot be down. My insert name of really cool product and platform depends on it." So that really crystallized things for us. Yes, we are popular. We really, really are popular. And and fortunately, those folks took up they framed, so the problem was established, and they took up, a collaborative approach in helping us solve it. And from day one, those folks have really been along with us for the journey, and it's all public now. If you've seen some of our announcements here, we wouldn't be able to have gotten to where we are right now without the support and engagement of the Cursor folks, Amazon, and the Google team as well have really been huge in helping us and figure out how to solve this in a way that meets not only the needs of those large scale commercial adopters, but ultimately, and this is where, as Mike was saying, we're not going to forget where we've come from or our mission. The commercial adopters are doing this in a way that allows us to preserve the commons, to make sure that ultimately developers and open source projects have access to that same infrastructure in a way that's robust and sustainable.
Okay, so the big question, like, what have you done, right? When we think of open source, we always think of, oh, it should be free, right? Like, this shouldn't cost anything. It's open source, which of course is ridiculous for anyone, involved in it. I mean, Mike, if you've been the director of the Eclipse Foundation, you've been in the middle of this for forever. But so explain to me what do you call the Open VSX managed registry? Like, what does that mean? Because it's not, I guess I don't even know what to call it. I'll let you two take it from here. Like, tell us exactly what we're talking about here, right? Because it's not, there's the Open VSX registry, which is like what we think of as the free open source registry, but you've created a new thing. And I know, like, I don't think anyone has tried this before. So this is very exciting.
Can I take a short stab and then you can add all the details? So, Thabang, so basically the short version is it's the same thing with an SLA. So we're not running a separate service in the physical sense. But what we've done is overlaid a product quality promise on top of the shared service. So the good news is, John Q public or Joe developer is going to get the same quality of service. But now it's going to be funded by the companies that need that quality of service for their business. And that's one of the things that, just to backtrack a little bit, when we had our outage last year, one of the things that it, I'm still, I'm still surprised that I can be surprised, in the sense that, wait a second, you built a business on top of a piece of critical infrastructure. If we go down, your business goes down, and you never thought to call us. Like, the first time we'd ever talked to these people is when we went off the air. And I think that, Brian Fox and others have talked about this phenomenon where this is not open source. This is critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Open VSX, actually, the implementation code is an open source project. And you can see all the source code, but running that server on infrastructure to deliver 600 million downloads a month, that's not open source. That's critical infrastructure. And so now let's hand it over to Thabang to tell us, is like, okay, exactly what is the SLA? How did we productize this, and what does this actually mean for the companies that are helping support it?
Okay, I have one additional question to Bung for you as part of this. So Mike talked about companies that have built their, like, I guess, product, or I'm not sure what the word to use, on top of this. Now, are we talking about a company like Cursor that literally has like a VS Code tool that's then using you for the plugin? Are we talking about like a Fortune 500 company that's just running a lot of VS Code internally, and they're just pulling a lot of plugins, or is it both?
It is both. We see let's say, most of the usage actually coming from, I don't want to say a handful, but certainly less than 20 or
Yeah.
thereabouts adopters. And as Mike said, they're forks, they're folks anyone who's essentially leveraged that VS Code extension API is the sweet spot. Often, as we were heading to launch, people were asking, well, who's this for? It's like, well, I think it's kind of self-evident. You know yourself. If you've built a product, and for us, just even in terms of figuring out the addressable market for this, it was easy because we looked at our logs, and we saw, okay, these are all the people who are heavy users. And I really want to emphasize, these are users who, they didn't know that, and maybe this is to Mike's point, that because it's open source and nobody was asking them to pay, they thought, okay, well, that's what it is, right? So this is a very compelling business case because I've got zero cost for this critical part of my platform and my service. Once we did make them aware that, hey, there's a cost to us, and open source is free as in puppies, um, not as in free beer, uh, but that infrastructure is not, because of these hard costs and because of the people costs, all of these things. Once they understood that, and as we're talking to people these days, it immediately resonates, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fair, because I have Azure and Google Cloud and other infrastructure. This is just another it's just another invoice that I have to pay for. And how we structured it, and this is where we kind of went to product management fundamentals. We went out and we spoke to a lot of people. One of the unsung heroes of this journey is our executive assistant, who set up all of our calls. But because there were so many conversations, I think probably I spoke to between 20 and 30 different folks who are representative of the various stakeholder groups, including developers themselves, and said, hey, what would you be looking for as we build out a service? And one of the things that really stood out as a theme was that, this is critical infrastructure for us. It's a commercial dependency. And like any other, we expect some operational assurance, which is, business speak for an SLA with some skin in the game from the Eclipse Foundation. So the subtitle to what Mike described as the notion that we're the first of many of our peers who operate these managed or these package registries. Um, that's something that we had to grapple with as well, which is that we historically are not set up. We hadn't been set up to offer any types of SLAs, whether that's legally, commercially, or operationally, right? So that's where the real work happened, and I think so people specified, what they'd be looking for, what they'd be willing to pay for, and as we were going through that journey, we always had in mind that, first of all, the developer community, the open source projects that rely on Open VSX, it's got to be a net positive for them. And this is where, going back to what Mike said, by design, it's going to be better, where we've leveraged the investments that we're making for the whole ecosystem. We've leveraged and applied those investments to increase security, so to have pre-publication security checks or verification checks on the extensions themselves, and implemented a bunch of hardening that we think is ultimately beneficial for the developers who use this every day.
So here's, I think, where I would like to maybe direct us, and I'm curious. So there's kind of two thoughts I have in my brain for everything that the Eclipse Foundation is doing. Is obviously, first of all, have you seen like any real pushback from the community, specifically the community? Because I think this is one of those instances where a lot of businesses are often happy to say, like, yes, I'm using your service, I will give you some money, just please let me give you money. And that's like a whole other open source problem. But then I've seen the community, right? Like folks, the normal people, the open source developers that are like, wait a minute, I'm writing these plugins and you're now charging people money to use my plugins. Like, what's going on with this? And so I'm curious if that's happened yet.
Oh, to be clear, we are not and never will charge people to use a plugin.
Right.
Or to use any of the extensions. So we're not charging. I think there are some VS Code extensions out there that are under a non-open source license, and that's between you and the publisher, not us. We're just strictly an intermediary.
Well, you're not publishing those plugins, right?
We are not publishing those plugins. So we have thousands of, I think we're up to 9,000 publishers. And so, it's a big body of people that are and companies that are doing the publication. The only people that we are charging are companies that we can identify as large scale consumers. And particularly right now, we're targeting the group of companies that are hitting us at greater than 3 RPS. Which, by the way, is that's a number that you can't get to unless you're really like that's a lot of traffic.
What is an
It's almost
RPS?
11. That's a request per second, so a query per second. So that's hitting up the APIs for a download, a metadata query, anything like that. And to Mike's point, 3 RPS sustained over the course of an hour is 1,800 requests. So when you're getting to that level, you really cease to be an individual developer. And one of the things that we implemented specifically for the open source projects, because we will never launch an open source project to utilize the infrastructure, is essentially an allow list mechanism, right? So anyone who needs to have access, they have a clear mechanism to ensure that they continue to. At the end of the day, I think this is one of those examples where silence is golden, where we haven't heard any response from the community, certainly no negative response, because their work, so between the time that we flipped the switch and started enforcing rate limits and now, it's been a non-event. It's been business as usual for them. I think if they had started to see some negative differences in terms of their ability to do their work, then we would have heard about it and we would have wanted to hear about it.
For sure. Yeah. And I know this is one of the topics that comes up with a lot of the other package registries I've spoken with, is they have a very small number of, I think it might have been Maven who told me 2% of the IPs are using like 80% of their traffic, right? On for Maven. I know you guys said you were in a similar situation. So it is sort of mind boggling in that regard. So, Okay, so here's kind of the next thing I have in mind then is you're paving the way for, I guess we'll call it sustainable package registry ecosystems, because that's fundamentally what we need. Like, we can't keep doing this for free forever. It's obviously not going to continue. And so I'm curious, I shouldn't say I'm curious. How have the other registries reacted to this? I'm certain you've spoken to more than one of them, because I'm sure they're all like, ooh, it's working. When can we do it? Right?
So I'll take a lot. There, I would call the word I would use first and foremost is intrigued.
Yeah.
As in like, okay, this is a journey. We're really interested in seeing what you're learning along the way. The one thing I'll say is the Eclipse Foundation is larger than most open source foundations, right? Like we have over
Yes.
100 staff. We've been around for 22 years. We have like a for-profit subsidiary in Germany that actually is the reseller in this. Like this, that's who's actually negotiating these sales contracts with these companies. And and we have legal people on staff. Like we have the sort of organizational capacity to do something like this. I mean, even hiring in a lot of cases, hiring 8 people over a year, that just doing that alone would be pretty crazy for some of these other
Yeah.
organizations because they're so small. So um, I'll freely admit that we are paving the way, and that's why we're here talking to you today. But there are challenges in that other organizations are going to have to every. I always like to use this line, like every open source foundation is a victim of its own history, right? So that they have their own history, their own community, that how they got to where they are, whether they're set up as a C3 or as a C6 or something else. In our case, we're actually a Belgian international nonprofit association. So there's all these things that go into figuring out the exact business model that each one of these other package repositories are going to have to deal with. And so I think there's going to be some bumps along the way. I do think that people are very happy to see that we've been able to do this and not die in a sea of flames. Uh, so we at least we got that going for us, right? So I think that's part of the story. But I do think that this is we are the first. We will not be the last.
Yeah.
In one way or another, every other package repository is going to have to figure out a way to emulate what we have done here. And I think that's actually one of the
Yeah.
key messages I want to give to you to anybody who's listening, which is if you're working for an organization and your organization today is using Maven Central, NPM, PyPI, any of these things, you have to start realizing that this service that up until now you've thought of as infinite and free, at some point in the future is no longer going to be infinite and free.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I will say, just from we'll say partially business perspective, partially like open source perspective, I love that the approach you took is a commercial relationship, as in, provider consumer model versus can you maybe donate to our foundation and we'll try real hard to not screw it up.
Yeah, to be fair, we tried that. So and I think what we and the other folks have realized is that that doesn't scale. That model doesn't scale, and there's a discontinuity or a mismatch, an impedance mismatch between trying to solicit funds, donations, please, sir and brother, can you spare a dime, to actually aligning the consumption and the funding of that to a consumption model that is ultimately where the downstream, these organizations, the adopters, that's how they're getting paid. So it's essentially a continuity in terms of the value chain, which is that, hey, you are used to charging for this, Mr. or Ms. Vendor in this space. You should, the economics should flow in the opposite direction as well. That's the way it becomes better for everyone, and we're able to
Yeah,
deliver.
So the one thing I want to add to that is, in my experience, a lot of companies, and particularly a lot of enterprises, would actually prefer a commercial relationship. It's actually much more difficult for them to become a member or to come up with a donation or a sponsorship than it is for them to just sign an agreement and pay an invoice. Because especially enterprises, the approval path that you have to go through for a sponsorship or a membership is a very different, and in many cases alien journey for an IT manager than oh, I have this business dependency. This organization is providing us with a real service. We need to sign an agreement and pay their bill.
For sure. And those donations are the first thing on the chopping block when it's time to tighten the belt, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
know this. You've been running a foundation for a decade, you know?
Yep.
That's certainly our experience. Not only are the donations and memberships the first to be cut, but increasingly and sadly, a number of our champions and the folks that we think to be used to dealing with, the OSPOs themselves were being disintegrated and removed from the org chart. So that's certainly the case, and that's part of the, let's say, the landscape that led us in the direction that we went. I'd also add that we, in securing the let's say the business, we often started to speak to people that we hadn't spoken to before because we were held at arm's length by the OSPO folks, or at least that was the interface point, rather. The OSPOs, the open source program offices in these corporations. And then all of a sudden, we became very interesting to the product and business leaders because, hey, do not touch that Open VSX thing. Right, that registry, without those resources, the product doesn't work, and we're not able to drive our business growth. So the conversation changed, and this, maybe one last thing I'll say is that I do want to thank our peers and counterparts, folks like Brian Fox, who you've had on the show here, because without them, those are one of the many calls that I had, just even getting a sense of how we could approach this. That learning that was shared with them, we are paying it forward in terms of us sharing as widely and broadly as we can the lessons that we've learned, and hoping to or helping to ease the way for these folks that inevitably, as Mike says, will have to figure out how to do this on their own terms.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing that I haven't really touched on too. A lot of the companies that we're working with see value in the fact that we are still a vendor neutral open source foundation, and that this is being operated in a vendor neutral manner. So yes, we're charging some companies to help pay the freight, but the fact that there is a single vendor neutral point of ecosystem control for basically the entire AI development landscape, that's actually a really good thing for everybody. And because the last thing, you don't want to have Cursor having its repo and Anti-Gravity having its repo,
Yep.
and so on and so forth. That's not the solution that anybody wants to get to.
100%.
Yeah, and on that point, I think that's one of the things that we've seen because Open VSX is self-hostable. So you don't have to use the public service or the managed registry. You could put this on your own infrastructure and do it yourselves. But I think what Mike highlighted is really the key point, is that people trust the Eclipse Foundation or our governance and our track record to be that vendor neutral operator of this infrastructure. That's why you've seen, I think one of the reasons that's contributed to the growth is the trust, and having that reflected in what people are able to do in terms of actually consuming the service. We've got trust built in. Trust is as being translated into what people download and utilize as a service.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And you'll both probably love this is I feel like, I don't know if I'd say I have a favorite foundation, but I use the Eclipse Foundation often as my poster child for, like, I think the group that really gets a lot right, where just, your structure, your governance model, you're European based, which I know has some maybe upsides or downsides depending upon how you look at it, but I think it has some huge upsides. And you guys do just an amazing job, which I love. So, all right, let's land this plane now. So what do you want us to know? What are the next steps? What should everyone do who's listening?
I think for one thing, I guess it depends who it is, but for the commercial adopters of Open VSX, they should reach out to us if they haven't already. If we haven't spoken to you, please do speak to us, and we'd be happy to get you onboarded and situated in the managed registry service. I think a shout out, a thank you, and keep it up. And we couldn't do this without you, to the community, to the developers out there. They are the lifeblood of not only our foundation, but the open source industry as a whole. So thank you to them, and encourage them to continue to stay involved and provide your leadership and essentially the brain power and the arms and legs to this movement. I'd also say, watch this space. We are increasingly, driven by the adopters and other stakeholders in our ecosystem. We're seeing call for the Open VSX model to be applied to AI artifacts more generally, right? So it's coming soon to Open VSX is really providing a repository for different AI artifacts, MCP servers, skills, plugins, all of that. So over time, and working closely with our community and the ecosystem, you'll start to see more of these AI components and artifacts hosted at Open VSX, and that's really the key to that, is that we're growing with our community and the industry's needs in mind rather.
All right, Mike, take us home.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and tell our story. Thank you also for the kind words about the Eclipse Foundation. I think, back to what we said at the very beginning, we are the first open source package repository to go down this path, but we will certainly not be the last. And I think it's a change, but frankly, it's a change that has to happen because the economics of managing critical infrastructure based on sponsorship and donations is a fundamentally broken business model, and it's not sustainable. So we have to do and try new things. So thank you very much.
100%. I've been wondering when this would happen, and I'm very excited that it was your crew and specifically the way you're doing it, because I feel like you have set up the rest of the industry for success in this regard, versus doing something incredibly stupid in a ridiculous way and everyone hates everything. And it's like, oh crap, now what do we do? Like, we've ruined it for everyone. So this is a huge deal. Like, I'm really excited to watch this one work. I will be very excited to have you both back maybe in a year or so, and we can see like, how's it going, assuming we'll see, maybe Mike will have less hair and Thabang will have more. Like, who knows how these things work out. But no, this has been amazing. I mean, thank you both for the time. I absolutely appreciate it. This has been a treat. I've learned a ton. I've no doubt so has everyone listening and watching. So just, yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, good luck and keep up the good work.